This is not content you watch passively. This is not something you play in the background, while your attention is somewhere else. If that's what you're here for, you can leave now, because this only works if you actually think, not react. Think. So pause everything for a second. No distractions, no scrolling, no second screen, just you and your mind. Because what we're about to talk about is something that shapes your entire life, without you even questioning it. And once you see it, you won't be able to go back to how you used to think. Today, we're talking about something most people completely misunderstand. Identity versus reality. Now let's get into it. Most people think they know who they are. They're wrong. Not because they're stupid, but because they confuse identity with reality. And those are two completely different things. Your identity is what you believe about yourself. Your reality is what you actually do. And here's the problem. Most people live in their identity, not in their reality. Now think about this. You can say, I'm disciplined. But if your daily actions don't show discipline, that's not reality. That's a story. You can say, I'm trying. I want to improve. I'm working on it. But if your behavior doesn't match that, it means nothing. Now here's a real fact. Your brain is built for self-consistency. That means it will always try to match your actions to your identity, even if that identity is limiting you. Now let that sink in. If you believe, I'm not the type of person who finishes things, you will act like it, automatically, not because you choose to, because your brain wants to stay consistent. Now here's where it gets dangerous. Most people don't question their identity. They protect it. They defend it, even when it's wrong. Now think about this. How often do you say things like, that's just how I am. I've always been like this. That's not me. That's not truth. That's identity protecting itself. Now here's something deeper. Your identity is not built by thinking. It's built by evidence, by repetition, by what you do consistently. So if you repeat certain behaviors long enough, your brain creates a label, and that label becomes your identity. Now let me ask you something honestly. If I watched your last 7 days, your real actions, not what you say, what you actually do, what would I say about you? That's your real identity, not what you believe, what you repeat. Here's another fact. Your brain hates contradiction. This is called cognitive dissonance. When your actions don't match your identity, your brain feels tension, and it wants to remove that tension. But here's the catch. Most people don't change their actions. They change the story. Now think about this. You skip something important. Instead of saying, I didn't follow through, you say, I'm just not that type of person. Now the behavior stays, and the identity adjusts. And that's how people stay stuck. Now here's the brutal truth. You don't become what you want. You become what you repeat. Every time. No exceptions. So if your identity doesn't match your reality wins. Always. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because your identity is not just wrong sometimes. It's outdated. Completely outdated. And you're still living by it. Now think about this. Your brain builds identity based on past evidence, not current potential, past repetition. So if you used to fail at something, struggle with something, avoid something, your brain stores that as, this is who I am. Now here's the problem. Even if you change, your identity doesn't update automatically. It lags behind. Now let that sink in. You can be improving, but still think like the old version of yourself. And that gap between who you are becoming and who you think you are is where most people sabotage themselves. Now here's a real fact. Your brain filters reality based on identity. This is called confirmation bias. You don't see everything. You see what confirms your belief. Now think about how dangerous that is. If you believe, I'm not disciplined, your brain will look for proof. Every time you delay, it goes, see, that's you. But what about the moments you did follow through? Ignored, filtered out, because it doesn't match the identity. Now here's where it gets crazy. Two people can do the exact same thing and interpret it completely differently. One says, I messed up, I need to fix this. The other says, yeah, that's just me. Same action, different identity, different outcome. Now let's go deeper. Your identity doesn't just affect how you act. It affects what you even try. Now think about this. If you believe, I'm not the type of person who succeeds at this, you won't even fully try. You'll hold back. You'll hesitate. You'll stay safe. And then when it doesn't work, you say, "See? I knew it." That's not failure. That's self-fulfilling prophecy. Here's another real fact. Your brain protects identity more than it protects truth. That means it would rather be wrong than inconsistent. Now let that hit. You can literally stay stuck just to stay consistent with a belief. Now think about your own life. Where are you limiting yourself? Not because you can't do more, but because you don't see yourself that way. Where are you holding back? Because it doesn't match your identity? That's the real problem. Not ability, not opportunity, identity. Now here's the brutal truth. You are not your potential. You are your repeated behavior, and your brain will always choose behavior that matches your identity. So what do? First, stop identifying with your past. Just because you were something doesn't mean you are that now. Second, create a new standard. Not "I want to." I am someone who. Make it clear. Make it strong. Third, back it up with action. Because identity without proof doesn't stick. Now here's the reality. Most people will hear this, agree with it, and keep living the same way. Because changing identity is uncomfortable. It feels fake at first. It feels unnatural. But that's exactly how it's supposed to feel. Because you're breaking a pattern. Now the question is simple. Are you living based on who you were, or who you could become? Because that difference changes everything. Let's stop talking about people. This is about you. Because right now, you already have an identity in your head. A clear one. You just don't question it. You think, this is who I am. But the real question is it actually true? Or is it just repeated? Now let me ask you something honestly. How often do you say things like, "I'm not disciplined. I always mess things up. I can't stay consistent"? You say it casually, like it's nothing. But your brain doesn't treat it like nothing. It treats it like a command. Now think about that. Every time you say something about yourself, you reinforce it. Not once, repeatedly. And over time, it becomes your identity. Now here's where it gets dangerous. You start acting based on that identity, without even thinking. You don't try fully. You don't push all the way. You stop early. Not because you can't do more, but because it doesn't match who you think you are. Now let me be direct. You are not failing because you lack ability. You are failing because you're loyal to the wrong identity. Let that sink in. You're protecting a version of yourself that's holding you back. Now think about this. You say you want to change. You say you want more. You say you want to improve. But your actions don't match that. Why? Because your identity doesn't match that. And your brain will always follow identity over intention. Always. Now here's something deeper. You don't just act like your identity. You defend it. Even when it's wrong. Even when it limits you. Even when it keeps you stuck. You protect it. Because changing identity feels like losing yourself. Now think about how crazy that is. You'd rather stay stuck than become someone new. Now let me ask you something real. If I removed your past, your old patterns, your labels, your excuses, who would you be? Because that version of you exists. You just don't act like it. Now here's the brutal truth. You are not who you think you are. You are what you repeat daily. That's it. Not your thoughts. Not your intentions. Your actions. Now think about your last few days. Your real behavior. Not what you planned. Not what you said. What you actually did. That's your identity. Nothing else. Now here's where it changes. You don't fix this by thinking differently. You fix it by acting differently. Even when it feels fake. Even when it feels wrong. Even when it feels like, this is not me. Because that feeling means you're breaking the old identity. Now let me be direct. If it feels natural, you're still the same person. If it feels uncomfortable, you're changing. That's the signal. Now here's what you do. First, stop repeating negative identity statements. Cut them completely. Second, define who you actually want to be. Clear, specific, no vague words. Third, act like that person, daily, even if it feels unnatural. Because repetition creates identity. Now here's the reality. Most people won't do this. Because it's easier to stay the same. Easier to say, that's just who I am. But that's not truth. That's comfort. Now let me ask you something honestly. Are you actually trying to change? Or are you just protecting the same identity? Because your actions already answered that. Let's be completely honest now. You don't have an identity problem. You have an honesty problem. Because deep down, you already know your reality doesn't match your identity. You know it. You feel it. You just don't want to face it. You say you're disciplined, but your actions don't show discipline. You say you want more, but your behavior stays the same. You say you're serious about change, but you keep doing the same things. Now let that sink in, because this is where most people lie to themselves. They don't look at what they do. They look at what they intend. And intention means nothing without action. Now think about this. If someone didn't hear your words, if they only watched your behavior, what would they say about you? Would they say, this person is focused? Or would they say, this person talks more than they act? Be real, because that answer is your reality. Now here's the brutal truth. Your identity right now is built on excuses, not actions. Excuses like, I'm trying, I'll get there, I just need more time. No, you don't need more time. You need alignment between what you say and what you do. Now let me ask you something direct. How many times did you tell yourself, I'll start tomorrow? How many times did you plan something and didn't follow through? How many times did you say, this is it, and then went back to the same behavior? That's not bad luck. That's identity versus reality. And reality is winning every time. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. You're not just inconsistent. You're predictable, completely, because your behavior follows patterns. Same triggers, same reactions, same outcomes. Now think about how crazy that is. You already know what you're going to do before you even do it, and you still call it trying. Now here's something deeper. You don't act like who you want to become. You act like who you've been. And that's the problem, because your past behavior is controlling your present identity. Now let me be direct. You're not stuck. You're loyal. Loyal to your old patterns. Loyal to your old identity. Loyal to the version of yourself that keeps you comfortable, even if it's limiting you. Now think about this. Every time you say, that's just who I am, what you're really saying is, I'm not willing to change. Because identity is not fixed. It's built, daily, through action. Now here's the shift. You don't become someone new by thinking about it. You become someone new by acting like it, repeatedly. Now here's what you need to do. First, stop lying to yourself. If your actions don't match your identity, accept it. Don't sugarcoat it. Second, cut the gap. Close the distance between what you say and what you do. Third, prove it. Daily. Not once. Not when you feel like it. Every day. Now here's the reality. Most people won't do this because it requires accountability. It requires discipline. It requires facing the truth. And most people avoid that. Now let me ask you something honestly. Are you building a real identity? Or just talking about one? Because your actions already answered that. Let's go deeper. Because this is where most people lose themselves completely. You don't just live with a false identity. You build your entire life around it. Quietly, step by step, without even realizing what you're doing. Now think about this. If your identity is wrong, every decision you make will also be wrong. Not because you're stupid, but because you're operating from the wrong base. If you believe, I'm not consistent, what happens? You don't even expect yourself to follow through. You already assume you'll stop. So when you do stop, it feels normal. It feels expected. Now let that sink in. You are predicting your own failure, and then living it out. Now here's where it gets even more serious. You don't just act based on identity. You limit your effort because of it. You don't go all in. You don't push to the edge. You don't commit fully. Why? Because deep down, you don't see yourself as that person. Now let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever held back, even though you could have done more? Not because you were tired, not because you couldn't, but because something inside you said, this isn't you. That's identity blocking your reality. Now here's the brutal truth. You are not living at your potential. You are living at your identity. And if that identity is small, your life will be small, automatically. Now think about this. Two people, same opportunity, same situation, same resources. One moves forward, one stays stuck. Why? Identity. One sees himself as someone who acts. The other sees himself as someone who hesitates. Same world, different self-image, different outcome. Now here's something even deeper. Your identity doesn't just control your actions. It controls your standards. What you accept, what you tolerate, what you allow. If your identity is weak, your standards are low. You accept delay. You accept distraction. You accept inconsistency. And over time, that becomes your normal. Now let me be direct. You don't rise above your identity. You stay inside it. Always. Now here's the part most people avoid. You already know what kind of person you need to become to reach your goals. You know it. More disciplined, more focused, more consistent, more controlled. But you don't act like that person. You think about it. You talk about it. But you don't live it. Now think about how crazy that is. You know the answer, and still choose something else. That's not lack of knowledge. That's identity mismatch. Now here's the shift. You don't become that person by waiting. You become that person by acting like it. Before it feels natural. Before it feels real. Before it feels like you. Now let me be clear. It will feel fake at the beginning. It will feel forced. It will feel uncomfortable. But that's the point. Because you're breaking your old identity. Now here's what you do. First, stop reinforcing the old version. No more. That's just me. Cut it. Second, define your new identity. Clear, strong, non-negotiable. Third, act like it daily, even when it feels wrong. Because repetition creates reality. Now here's the truth. Most people won't do this. Because it requires discipline. Because it requires discomfort. Because it requires honesty. But if you don't do it, nothing changes. Because your identity will keep pulling you back. Every time. Now ask yourself this. Are you acting like the person you want to become? Or the person you've always been? Because that answer is your life. Now this is where everything becomes clear. No more explanations. No more concepts. Just truth. You don't have two lives. One in your head, and one in reality. You only have one. And it's defined by what you do. Not what you believe. Not what you say. Not what you plan. What you repeat. Every single day. Now think about this carefully. You can create the perfect identity in your mind. Strong, disciplined, focused. But if your actions don't match it, it doesn't exist. It's just a story. And stories don't change your life. Behavior does. Now here's the part that hits hardest. You already know the gap. You feel it. That difference between who you say you are and how you actually live. That tension. That discomfort. That's not random. That's truth. Now let me ask you something honestly. How long are you going to ignore that gap? A week? A month? Another year? Because time is moving anyway, and your identity is being built every single day, with or without you being aware of it. Now here's the brutal truth. You are not becoming who you want to be. You are becoming what you repeatedly do. And if your actions stay the same, your identity stays the same, no matter what you tell yourself. Now think about this. If someone watched your life for 30 days, no words, no explanations, just your actions, what would they say? This person is serious? Or, this person is stuck in the same patterns? Because that answer is your reality. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. You don't need to figure anything out anymore. You already know. You know what you should be doing. You know what you keep avoiding. You know where you're holding back. So let's stop pretending this is complicated. It's not. You are either acting in alignment with your future, or you're repeating your past. Every decision, every action, every moment. Now here's the shift. You don't fix identity by thinking about it. You fix it by proving it. Through action. Repeated action. Even when it feels unnatural. Especially then. Now let me be direct. If it feels comfortable, you're still the same person. If it feels uncomfortable, you're changing. That's the signal. Now everything comes down to one thing. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Right now. The next moment. The next decision. Because that's where identity is built. Not in big speeches. Not in plans. In small actions. Repeated. Now here's the final truth. You don't become someone new one day. You become that person the moment your actions change. And the moment they stay consistent. So stop talking about who you are. Stop thinking about who you could be. Start proving it. Daily. Because at the end of the day, your identity is not what you say. It's what you live. And right now, you already know the difference. So the only question left is simple. Are you going to keep living in a story? Or are you finally going to align your reality with it? Because both paths are clear. Both outcomes are predictable. And both are completely in your control. Now decide.